Okay, everyone. Hi there. It's 6 o'clock now. In fact, it's 1 minute past 6, according to my clock. I'm Andrew. I'm associate publisher at Icon Books, very proud publisher of Sexuality, a graphic guide by Meg-John and Jules Scheele. I'm not going to say much more. There's a few more people to admit, but we have loads of people on this event this evening, which is wonderful. So I will mute myself and hand over to Joe. But just to say beforehand that please keep yourself muted, generally speaking. But there will be some time for questions at the end, which Joe, I think you're going to ask people to send across in the chat, aren't you? So I will mute myself and over to you.
Amazing, Andrew. Thank you. Well, thanks so much for joining us, everyone. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for joining us, Meg-John. I feel like the coolest person in the world right now. And lots of my friends are very jealous. So, oh, there we go.
Oh, I can see everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Oh, that's so much better. It was
Amazing.
Very weird not being able to see your faces. And I can see my own face as well, which is
and hopefully
helpful.
All your animals as well. That would be really great.
Yeah, if anyone wants to share animals, they're very welcome. As you know, this book is quite animal friendly. Oh, puppy! Yes. I don't know if anyone. Oh, I know that animal. That's Jack. Yeah, the book has a support animal in it as one of the main characters.
Absolutely.
So, yes.
Yes, we shall get there. Yes.
Yeah.
Very excited to talk about all things to do with the book. So my name's Joe. I'm part of the Bookish Type team. For those of you that don't know, the Bookish Type is a queer independent bookshop in Leeds. We're upstairs in the Merrion Centre. So do please come see us once lockdown's over, because we miss you all very much. And Meg-John, do you want to introduce yourself and say a bit about your work? There may be some people here today that perhaps don't know you so well.
Absolutely. Well, I was just saying before, it's so nice to be at an event in Leeds, even though I'm not physically in Leeds, because I grew up in Bradford and Leeds is a big part of my history. So to be celebrating this book with you feels like a really appropriate thing to be doing. I'm a writer. I'm a full-time writer now, thanks to these books.
Amazing. You got there.
Yeah, I made it. And it's very much thanks to Icon that that's the case. And so yes, I write these graphic guides series around topics like gender and sexuality and relationships, but I also write self-help style books as well around those same topics and mental health more broadly. I was an academic. I'm now a recovering academic. And I was also a therapist for a while. So I try and draw kind of academic ideas, activist ideas and therapeutic ideas all together in one place to talk about these subjects.
Great. At least you could kind of therapize yourself once you left academia.
Right. Yeah, it was useful to have both of those things. Yeah.
Yeah. A great toolbox. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. So yeah, the this new graphic guide, Sexuality, which I've got here precariously displayed on my bookshelf behind me, I hope it doesn't fall down, is part of a series of 3 books. You've also got one on queer, a graphic history, and one on gender as well. So first of all, I'm really intrigued to know how these projects came about, because I mean, I've read all 3 of them, absolutely love them. The illustrations are amazing.
Right.
Jules Scheele, so good. And they're just such a marvelous resource as well for loads of different thinkers thinking on these topics. What started it all?
Yeah, I can tell you our origin story. Yeah. So basically,
in true kind of comic book fashion.
That was what I was going for there. Yes.
Yeah.
So so Icon got in touch with me a while, well, back in, I can't remember when it was, but that about the queer one. So that was the first one in the series, and they asked me, like, basically they have Icon have the series of sort of introducing guides already, which people might be familiar with. You know, when you're a student, they're really good go-to kind of comic introduction to Marx or Sartre or genetics or whatever. And they said they were going to do one on queer theory. So that was my initial approach from Kira, the editor, was like, would you be up for doing an introducing guide on queer theory? And I very nearly said no, because I thought I find queer theory quite hard, even though I was drawing on queer theory ideas in my work. You know, I had that imposter syndrome of like, this is not something I could do like a whole book on myself. But it was a comic book, and I'm heavily into comics, as you can probably see from the walls behind me. And also I'm heavily into queer ideas and draw on them a lot. So, and I found them really helpful personally and politically. So I thought about it, and then I was like, I can't say no to this. So I went for it. And as the book was evolving, I guess, you know, they brought in a new illustrator as well. Jules hadn't worked with Icon before that, but they thought for this topic we need someone, you know, who also is really passionate about that topic to do the illustrations. And as the book was evolving, I think we all began to think, oh, this may be something different in a way to these introducing guides. You know, it could work as one of those, but it's also something a bit beyond that. And I think then that's when Icon decided to bring it out as this much more glossy book than those usually are. Just several decisions we made along the way seemed to lead to this different kind of approach to those other books, and then the queer one did really, really well. So we were like, well, I always wanted to do one on gender as well, because to really dig into that topic, and then it made sense to do one on sexuality, and rather hoping to do one on mental health next, and one on love and relationships as well at some point. Those would feel like the topics that I wanted to do, but we're also, there may well be one on class, one on race, one on disability at some point as well by other authors. So it's, you know, thinking about a kind of intersectional series of books really was the thinking after that initial one.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. So what made you, because there are lots of similar themes throughout all of the books. For instance, you're constantly questioning binary understandings of identity and desires and practices. What made you then think, okay, well, we need to do one completely on sexuality? This is kind of something that needs exploring in its own right. Yeah,
I mean, it's always been a passion of mine. You know, I think sex and sexuality is one of the ways that I really got into sort of academic study and activism. And a queer book, we had, you know, obviously in a queer book, there's quite a focus on gender and sexuality, and also something on race in there. But it felt like, you know, the main way we'd covered sexuality there is this kind of idea of the gay straight binary and troubling that, but we didn't get the chance to really dig in to all the other ways that sexuality is understood in our culture and the number that does on us. So to have the space to really dig into that in its own right felt really important. So this book deals with other binaries like normal, abnormal, you know, particularly through it, this whole idea that normal is something that we should aspire to sexually, and that we can have some sense of what's sexually normal that people should be going to. And also functional, dysfunctional is one that really pervades kind of cultural understanding around sexuality, about what functional bodies should be able to do and not do. And so we were able to dig much more into those, and the whole sweep of sexuality, because a big message of the book is that this idea that sexuality is just about the gender that we're attracted to, or the genders that we're attracted to, is so limited, that sexuality is this massive field, you know, and this really potentially exciting, dangerous, wonderful, scary kind of world. And then most of the ways we talk about it is just this tiny little bit of it. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad you really got the opportunity to have that space to unpick these things in more detail. Because that was definitely something I was feeling as I was reading the graphic guide on queer and on gender. Like, you've got a section on the kind of the sexologists, for example, in queer. And I just wanted more. Yeah. I'm so glad that there's a whole book now. Yeah. No, it was really nice to do that, and really nice to, I think, I just love the way we've been able to, we started with queer with this idea of like, well, it partly came from my imposter syndrome, actually, because when I started writing it, I was like thinking about this queer theorist who was going to read this book and tell me how wrong I was about everything. And then I reminded myself, that's not who this book is for. So I thought, who is this book for? It's like somebody who thinks they might be queer, somebody who's gone to a kind of university lecture about queerness and is really struggling to understand it. Maybe someone whose kids say they're queer and they don't know what that means. And so that gave us this idea to have these 4 characters who you follow through the book, and they're kind of learning as the book goes on. And in the queer book, it was quite basic. They were just kind of these characters who were almost like looking at the ideas and, oh, you know, how interesting. Then in the gender book, it got a bit more that the characters themselves had relationships to gender, that as they were coming across the ideas, they were finding them more or less helpful in relation to that. And then this book, they finally really have a character arc. So these 4 characters are exploring their sexuality through the book and their relationships with each other's, and you really get a sense of how they're finding their way through the book. And I love that kind of evolution that we've been able to do, and it's definitely something I'd like to continue. So it becomes a bit more like a graphic novel in a way that there is actually a character arc and a story going through it, as well as a sharing of ideas.
Yeah, the format of it being a graphic work made me imagine parents sitting down with their children and kind of going through it with them. It's just kind of got awesome. That kind of like in like a children's book sense, where there's like lots of images and you kind of flick through, and
and that's what the graphic format does so well, isn't it? It's like people will say, like, you can spend a long time just on one page because the image just brings so much more than just the words alone. Like, you can really reflect a lot on just one page of one of these books of like what it kind of brings up for you and relate to it. And something about the words and the images together that really enables that in a way that just the written word just wouldn't, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And we should just say at this point, given what you just said, the new guide on sexuality is this amazing kind of graphic mashup of Scooby-Doo and the Rocky Horror Picture Show as well. Yes. How did that come about?
That came out of my brain. I was very happy. Basically, I thought, okay, so it's sexuality. I want these characters exploring this like pleasure and danger, all these terrible messages we get about sexuality and how they relate to them. And then I was kind of like, well, Rocky Horror Show sprung to mind. It's like, okay, Brad and Janet going to the scary house, but is it a scary house or a house of pleasure? And then it's like, well, I don't want a white heteronormative couple navigating this book. That doesn't feel great. So it's kind of like, well, what else could we, bring in a lot more diversity with? And we had 4 characters in the previous books. So I was like, 4 characters going to a haunted house. And then it's like Scooby-Doo, obviously. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of nice to go back to that sort of my sort of 1980s kind of roots as well. These were both, I saw Rocky Horror in the 80s. I was a big fan of Scooby-Doo as a kid. So there was something lovely about that. And then also, Jules and I really enjoyed that we were able to, make Scooby-Doo more diverse, and we were able to make Rocky Horror Show more consensual. And we were able to get kind of cheeky and slashy with the whole thing as well, which is, we talk about slash fiction and shipping and stuff in the book, but we're also doing it. So it was, just bringing like the fun and the playfulness and a bit of an erotic flavor to the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It works really well.
Thank you.
It's great. Yeah. And so in the graphic guide, you're thinking about the ways in which our approaches to sex and the kind of experiences that we have often echo the ways in which we're also treated in wider culture. And you think about that particularly through consent and non-consensual culture. Could you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah. So I guess a big anyone who's familiar with other stuff that I've written will not. It's not a surprise that I locate a lot of our struggles in wider cultural messages and the systems and structures that surround us. And so, sex is no different. It's like, in a way, what I'm arguing is that the messages we receive about sex are really non-consensual. That there's this kind of script you must follow, there's this goal you must get to, there's ways bodies must work. And if we were to kind of follow all of these ideas around sex in wider culture, it would be really hard to be doing something consensual with ourselves or with other people. And the consent chapter in the book as well sort of talks about how wider culture is just really non-consensual. We're encouraged to treat some bodies and lives and labour as way more valuable than others. And this filters down through workplaces and education institutions, and inevitably through our relationships and our close relationships. And then how would it be possible to be really consensual with sex if all of those other layers are non-consensual? So that's a big theme of the book, is how could we shift things to make actual consensual relating possible across all these levels? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, thank you. And you just made me think that you did a podcast episode with Hannah Witten, Hannah's got a podcast called Doing It, and there you said that everything useful from life that we can learn from life, we can then apply to sex, and everything useful for life we can learn from sex as well. I thought was a really amazing way of putting it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's definitely a kind of theme in the book and towards the end, there's that kind of like pulling out what are all these things we might learn from our exploration of sexuality that could then apply to like everything in our lives personally and also politically.
Yeah. Well, politically is the word that's a good kind of segue into my next question. So thank you very much.
I thought I'd just like send that over to you.
So you do, in Rethinking Sex, you do end up engaging in a critique of the forces that kind of make up the texture of our lives: capitalism, heteronormativity, body normativity, and then of course legacies that we've got from colonialism and white supremacy. Could you talk a bit more about the way in which Rethinking Sex is related to a kind of wider project of progressive politics and then inevitably social justice?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you'll get that theme through the book. But I think it's, you know, if we look at the history of where all of this way of understanding sex and sexuality comes from, we can see that you can't disentangle it from any of those other forces, you know. And so therefore, when we kind of go from sex back to the wider world, we have to consider all those things. In fact, considering our personal sexuality should almost inevitably lead to an unpacking of all those other things as well. And I'm not a historian, but I did my best to kind of get that sense of those intersecting kind of forces and how the way we understand sexuality, particularly in relation to being normal or abnormal, it just can't be disentangled from this whole project of defining some bodies and lives as more normal or less normal, which was, you know, how it was justified to colonize people and enslave people, pay some people much less than others, treat women in certain ways, you know, in terms of reproducing the workforce. So the history is all tangled up, and we quite enjoyed using the Scooby-Doo idea of removing the mask. So it's like we have this whole section in the book which is like, I think that was Kira's idea actually, was like, like let's sort of say whose fault is this, you know, who is the real monster here, and then it's heteronormativity, and then it's patriarchy, and then it's colonialism, and that was kind of fun. But yeah, they're all the point is that they're all the monster. And so yeah, that when we kind of start to unpack these messages around sexuality and how they've influenced us, then the idea is that in tuning into all of that, we would inevitably then notice, okay, these things are infused with also gender, race, disability, you know, they all come together in this whole project of defining normal and trying to force people into it and oppressing those who don't fit is, you know, that's the real monster. We need to have a way with that. Yeah,
there's a lot. It's a good job you've created this easy guide for us to kind of guide the way through all these monsters.
I mean, it's, you know, it's not super easy answers in the end, but hopefully, you know, it sort of gives people some threads. And I mean, really the passion in these books is just to bring together lots of really important and useful voices that people may not have come across. So in a way, every page is like a little advert for, please go and read this person's book or this person's essay, the ones that resonate with you, right? So, you know, we can't unpack it all, but we can sort of point in the right direction of like, if you want to know more about transformative justice, it's over here. You know, if you want to know more about, like how we can tune into the erotic in ourselves, it's over here.
But all three of the books are packed with activists, historians, sociologists, scientists, anthropologists. There's so much. They are really great resources for the people that do want to go away and learn more.
Thank you.
I feel like, I'm not sure what you'd say about this, but I definitely picked up on a gratitude for a lot of Black feminist writers, people like Audre Lorde and Kimberly Crenshaw. For instance, you use Audre Lorde quite a lot in all three of the books, and I was wondering if you could talk about the ways in which these women have been important for you and for your work.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I think in terms of Kimberly Crenshaw and other intersectional feminists, it's that sense of these interlocking or intersecting forces. And like before I came across their work, I didn't have that clear sense of how this, we have to look at them all together in terms of our person. You know, we can't just look at take our sexuality and look at that alone, because it's deeply influenced by what gender we are, by race, by culture, by age, by disability. And, you know, many of these things, how we're positioned on them also changes over time. So that sort of set of ideas has been really influential through the books. But Audre Lorde particularly for this one, because her essay, The Uses of the Erotic, is it's really that essay, and one by Gail Rubin, who's a queer feminist activist. Those two essays, like, were the things that really influenced me the most in my thinking about sexuality. And I just really wanted to, like, engage a passion in other people, you know, through this book for those writings. Yeah, The Uses of the Erotic, it expands out the idea of the erotic way. You know, Audre Lorde is saying that this limited understanding of just, you know, sex, or just genital sex, or just heteronormative genital sex, is really problematic, and it's actually limiting us so much that we could expand out the idea of the erotics to include writing poems and building bookcases and engaging in tricky conversations with other people, and, you know, all of these things could be seen as the erotic. And then we can ask questions about, well, how can we engage in those things in ways that ignite the most pleasure in us and other people, or how can we engage with those things consensually? And there's also a real flavour in that essay of that, again, if we really tune in to what ignites pleasure in ourselves and follow those things in life, it's going to go way beyond, you know, having better sex. It's going to be about, like, I'm not going to put myself through this awful kind of work that I'm doing, or I'm gonna you know, do my relationships as a whole in different ways. And then hopefully, as we tune into that, we would also look out there and see, well, it's not cool that other people don't get to do that in the ways that I do, so what can I do again to work for justice much more broadly? And that's been taken up by thinkers like Adrienne Marie Brown, who are also mentioned quite a bit and work on pleasure activism. So this whole idea, again, mostly in Black feminism, that if we follow pleasure, it can take us to these places, seems like a really radical and important notion to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for talking about that. We've got about 8 minutes left, so I just wanted to open the floor up for questions for other people, really.
Yes, please.
I'm sure you're all, I know I've got a billion other questions I want to ask, so I'm sure other people have. So if you would like to ask a question, just you can just write it in the chat, and I'll read it out. I'm worried that suddenly there's just going to be like 100 questions just come flying in.
Oh well, I'm going to let you ask them. You can decide which ones to ask.
Oh no, okay. Yes, so I mean, you've spoken a bit about some writers that have influenced your work. Could you list any others?
Well, in terms of comics, I guess Alison Bechdel's a big one, who wrote the Dykes to Watch Out For series and Fun Home. And I'm really into kind of queer and mental health memoirs. So I think there's a blog post I've written about this that lists all the different ones, but there's a number of kind of queer and mental health memoirs, and often ones that cover the both together, that I find really useful, inspiring. But yeah, in terms of sexuality, I think Gail Rubin and Audre Lorde, that's why I really centered them in this book.
What made you leave academia?
See Daniel smiling because they know some of the answers to this. A lot of different reasons, but I did really want to focus on writing for a general audience. I found academic writing quite constraining. I'm much more passionate about getting the ideas often that I was coming across in academia, activism and therapy, that just weren't seeming to get out there on the self-help bookshelves, or, you know, in easy to read ways. So it's really nice to just have all my time for that. And I also think academic systems are quite toxic in a lot of places.
Yeah, thank you. Let me see.
There's like a lot of questions, so I'm
There
just
is
gonna
a lot
let
of questions
I'm gonna let
coming
you
in,
figure
yeah.
out which ones that you wanna. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of them are really big questions as well. Do you think that your work as an academic has greatly informed your work now? Do you wish you hadn't followed that path?
Oh, that is a
Have there
really
been
good
some good
question.
things? Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. No, I mean you'll see in the books that a lot of the really helpful ideas around sexuality do come from those who've researched it and theorized it there. It's just, and I think we need the people. I think that's something we cover in queer actually, that we need the folks who come up with the quite hard theories and the folks who can translate them, maybe to students, and then folks like me who are trying to take that and engage with wider audiences that way. So yeah, I'm definitely not fully down on academia. I just think the things that are prioritized there, I'm really into, particularly the kinds of knowledge and wisdom that are prioritized in academia, and that we need to kind of look beyond those, these conversations about decolonizing the curriculum, but also more embodied knowledges and wisdoms rather than the more kind of heady intellectual ones. Not that it's like one's better than the other, but we need it all together. And I think there's sometimes a bit of a binary there of prioritizing certain kinds of intelligence in academia over others.
Yeah, brilliant. And just kind of in relation to that, it's just made me think that what has been your experience as being a therapist, what has that kind of added to the mix for you as well?
Yeah, well, we'll guess that real sense of what's the lived experience of people. And, as a sex therapist as well, so specifically, just having one after another and after another person coming and saying, I'm not normal, what's wrong with me, really informed, my, and that's obviously things that I'd been asking myself as well when I was younger. And that really got me thinking the degree of suffering that these messages have around sexuality. And if we go on to do the mental health graphic guide, I'll be saying a similar thing there, that the degree of suffering that's caused by these wider cultures and systems, and the fact it's all individualized, so the person then ends up turning it all in on themselves and having so much fear and shame, rather than realizing that the wider culture's done a number on them. That's I think I got the sense of that much more vividly having person after person sit in front of me talking about it.
Yeah, and people perhaps feeling like they can't talk about these things unless they come to you. I think one of the great things about your focus on consent in the graphic guide on sexuality is you're getting us to talk to each other, to talk to our partners, to talk to those that we have intimate relationships with, to find out what we like, what we don't like, and get used to kind of being open about these things.
Yeah, it's wild, that one. I think Sandra Byer's piece of research, they found that people in long-term relationships know about 60% of what their partner likes sexually and only about 20% of what they dislike. And that is just wild that, when we're even in relationships where we are erotic with another person, so little of that is actually communicated because there's just so much shame and fear around this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm thinking about the blog post that you posted on your website, Rewriting the Rules, today, about the sex education that you got when you were younger. You just kind of came into your room and there were some books left on your bed.
Yeah. It wasn't the best. Yeah, I mean, and I was saying, in a way, I think I'm writing these books, for that person. So that, for, me back then in a way, and for anyone else, that I not saying that having 3 books of any kind is the, is all the sex education as someone needs it. Probably important to think beyond books. But yeah, certainly trying to put out there some messages that might be a better bet.
Yeah, absolutely. So if there are any parents listening and you were planning to leave a book on your child's bed, I think definitely the Sexuality graphic guide by Meg-John is not a bad place to start. But also talk to them as well. I think that'd
be
important.
Great. But then also, there's so much unlearning that needs to be done by those of us in that generation though, before, in a way, like we can't talk to young people until we've done that work. And how are we going to do that work when, that's part of the point of the book, I suppose, is that, we need to unlearn everything we know about sex and learn a very different way. And that's it's a really big ask. In some ways, young folks are in a better position because there's a bit better messages circulating, although sometimes they're still pretty bad. But I also have a real feeling for those of us who've come through all of that and are having to do all of that unlearning work.
Yeah, well, your work definitely makes that a lot easier, Meg-John, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we're coming to the end now. I just wanted to ask, well, firstly, thank you everyone for joining us and for all your questions. Sorry that we didn't get a chance to go through all of them. But Meg-John, what else are you working on at the moment? Because you seem to be doing loads, and I just wanted to ask, is there anything else you want to plug? Because
thank you. Yeah, I feel like not so much right now, actually, and the pandemic's been a pretty traumatizing experience for many of us, and I've been doing a lot of looking after my mental health and looking after my close people, really. But strangely enough, this book came out alongside another book, Hell Yeah, Self-Care, which I wrote with my colleague Alex Ian Taffy. And so that's just recently come out as well. So if you, again, Audre Lorde inspired, about self-care and collective care. So those two are both out at the moment. And Alex and I are just working on finishing a book called How to Understand Your Sexuality, which should be quite a nice companion to this one, the graphic guide, because it's much more about how do we do this work internally and in our communities. So that'll be out this time next year, I suspect.
Great, thank you. And everyone can find more about your work, as well as links to buying your work on rewritingtherules.com. That's your website, isn't it?
Absolutely. But please do order them from the bookish type.
Yeah, and on that note, I'm just going to add a link into the chat because as Meg-John rightly said, the Sexuality Guide is available now to order from the bookish type. So you can order everything there. And I do believe that they come with some stickers that Jules Scheele has done.
Yes, oh yes, Andrew got the answer to that.
I was just going to jump in there. So that's quite right. But what you have to do is, if once you've bought the book and you've got a receipt from wherever you buy it from, hopefully the bookish type, email that to info@iconbooks.com. info@iconbooks.com. I'll pop that in the chat as well, and then we'll send you a sticker sheet, lots of fun, which Jules put together. So thank you very, very much, Joe and MJ. It's been really great. I will leave this call open for a bit, just so that link that Joe put up you can all see. But thanks very much for coming along, and thank you very much. Congratulations, MJ, on the publication of your brilliant new book.
Thanks so much, and thanks for coming to celebrate. It's so nice to have a celebration of it on the day it comes out with all of you here. Really means a lot to me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, MJ. Thanks, everyone. It was so nice to have something to get dressed up for as well.
You got dressed up? I'm literally in my PJ bottoms with a water bottle. Sorry, I probably should have made more of an effort.
No, you look wonderful. You look absolutely wonderful. But, this is my official going out shirt. So any of my friends here watching will know that this is the shirt that I wear.
It's a good one.
When we used to go out, yeah.
Yeah, back in those days when going out was the thing.
You see. I'll just insert that link again one more time so that it doesn't get, in case it is getting lost for people. Oh, thank you, everyone.
Oh, that's really kind. Just scrolling back. So lovely. And people sharing their awful sex ed experiences as well. A bit of solidarity with that.
Yeah, really lovely messages in the chat. Yeah, once lockdown's over, MJ, we'll have to get you to the bookish type. That would be really lovely.
That'd be ace. Yeah, I'd love to be there in person.
It'd be so great if we could do one of these kind of in real life, IRL.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, I did LGBT. What was it? It was like a literary festival, I think. Do you know that one? It was this time last year, actually. I did a little tour of sort of Scotland and the north, and that was one of the things. And they had this. It was in the library in Leeds, a kind of little literary festival But did your books, your shop's even newer than that? Is that right?
Yes, yeah, we've been 5 months as a physical store. Been open for about 5 months now, yeah. But Ray and Nicola have been selling books online for quite a while now.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant!
Doing kind of
a place.
doing bookstores at different events and things like that.
Nice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm so excited to have an actual physical space now, and it is so lovely.
Oh, I really look forward to seeing it. It feels like a bunch more queer bookstores are kind of cropping up, really, like over this last year or so. There was just like Gaze the Word, and then there's the one in Glasgow, Categories, and then, suddenly now there's a few more. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, I think it was actually Categories books. Ray and Nicola went there and saw the bookstore there and kind of looked at each other like, we really need to get one of these in Leeds. Maybe we should do it. And that's kind of like how it started.
Oh, fab. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, great.
So whereabouts are you right now?
Down in Brighton now.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Somebody's saying their fiance organised that. Yes, down in Brighton, so right by the sea.
Amazing. I've never been, but I would love to go.
Oh yeah, it's good. And there's a feminist bookstore now here. I can't remember the name, but yeah, so, and definitely kind of queer friendly feminist bookstore too.
Amazing.
Yes, come to Brighton. Anyway, I guess, do we wind up now? It's like, I love Zoom. It's like we'll have this weird awkward beginning and a weird awkward ending as well. Sorry, you're saying something, Andrew?
I was just saying, very lovely to carry on chatting for a bit, but we probably should end now. So thank you very much, everyone. Please buy the book from Bookish.
The Bookish type. I'll just put that
see you again
there,
soon. Yes, perhaps not on Zoom. Thanks so much.
Let's hope so. Bye now. See you, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.